As global leaders are gathered in Azerbaijan for COP29, the oil giant Shell succeeded in overturning a landmark court ruling that required it to accelerate emission reduction efforts. A real blow for the Green campaign.
Well, Mark, back in 2021, Shell was ordered to reduce its global CO2 emissions 45% by 2030 compared to 2019 levels in a case brought by activists in the Netherlands, where it was headquartered back then. The company appealed, saying customers would only switch to using fossil fuels from other companies. On Tuesday, judges agreed with that argument and also said that the court couldn't impose a specific reduction percentage on the firm. They added, though, that companies like Shell had the responsibility to contribute to fighting climate change to protect human rights. Emerald Maxwell has more.
It came as a major disappointment. The climate activists gathered outside the courthouse in The Hague. As inside, the Dutch appeals court reversed a landmark ruling that imposed steep carbon emissions reductions on energy company Shell.
This should have been the moment of a real breakthrough in the fight against dangerous climate change. That didn't happen today, but the fight against dangerous climate change is a marathon, not a sprint, and the race has only just begun.
Hailed as historic, the original 2021 ruling said Shell must reduce its carbon emissions by 45% by 2030 compared to 2019. But on Tuesday, the appeals court dismissed that ruling, saying that although the multinational had a duty of care to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, there was currently insufficient consensus in climate science on a specific reduction percentage to which an individual company like Shell should adhere. After a string of courtroom victories, it's a defeat for climate activists, leaving a question mark over whether climate litigation is the right approach.
Well, there are some points of light, I guess, that the court, they acknowledge that Shell actually has to reduce their emissions. However, we cannot go further with this court case like this.
It's very disappointing, obviously, and it also kind of shows that maybe this isn't the right way to force Shell's hand in this matter.
Dutch environmentalists have not said whether they would launch a further appeal at the Netherlands Supreme Court. But Tuesday's decision was welcomed by Shell's CEO, who said the company believed it was the right one for the global energy transition, the Netherlands and our company. In March, Shell weakened its carbon emissions reduction targets, citing sustained demand for fossil fuels.
What a turnaround in circumstances there. Emerald Maxwell, our report. Now, UK efforts to take big oil to court have been on the rise.
Well, a report released in September by Zero Carbon Analytics, based on data from Columbia Law School's Sabin Center, says the number of cases filed against fossil fuel companies each year has nearly tripled since the Paris Climate Agreement. In the decade before the 2015 deal, the number was in the low single digits. Last year, there were 14 cases filed. More than half of the lawsuits have been brought in the United States and about a quarter of them in Europe. Companies taken to court include Shell, BP, ExxonMobil and Total Energy. There are currently 86 climate lawsuits and can be divided into different categories, from compensation for climate damages to misleading advertising or greenwashing, and, like in Shell's case, over companies' failure to implement emissions reductions aligned with the Paris Accord, Mark.
Now, here in France, parliamentary debate on next year's budget hit another stumbling block.
But France's National Assembly, the lower house of parliament, roundly rejected the revenue part of the budget bill that was largely rewritten by the far left and the far right from the initial bill drawn up by the government. It called for 58 billion euros in new tax revenue compared to 19 billion in the initial text, with more tax hikes on the rich and reduced VAT. 192 deputies voted for and 362 against, meaning the initial version of the bill will now head for the Senate.
Moving on to Germany, a major wage deal has been struck for the industrial sector.
Germany's largest trade union, IG Metall, agreed on a deal that will cover nearly 4 million employees, from car makers to engineers to metal workers, and will see them receiving a 5.5% wage increase over 25 months. This signals an end to negotiations that saw tens of thousands of workers go on strike. It comes at a difficult time for the country's manufacturing sector, though. The German economy economy is poised to contract for a second year running, and companies such as Volkswagen are shutting down plants and cutting jobs, Mark.
The tech giant Meta is to change its use of personalised ads here in Europe.
But the company says it will offer Instagram and Facebook users in Europe the option to receive fewer personalised ads in response to demands from EU regulators. This will allow users to choose to see ads based on their activity on these platforms. Meta also plans to reduce the fee for ad-free subscriptions by about 40% in Europe. Last month, the EU's top court said the tech firm must restrict the use of personal data harvested from Facebook for targeted ads.
Indeed, those ads can be a bit of a pain. I suspect they're making lots of money out of it, and we're not. But there you go. Quick check on the markets.
Stocks declined amid worries that incoming US President Donald Trump could appoint China hawk Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. Now, major European bourses were a sea of red this Tuesday as that prospect increased fears of a fresh trade war. Paris's CAC 40 lost 2.7%. Germany's DAX shed 2.1%. Wall Street also pulled back after a post-election rally that took both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 to fresh records. All main indices currently trading in negative territory.